What's the story, Morning Glory? What's the word, Hummingbird? Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and for joining me for this review of Love and Marriage Huntsville Season 5, Episode 2. So we're back at Dr. Francis's retreat. It is the next day. People are in the kitchen fixing breakfast, and the Whitlows, they don't believe the analysis that Dr. Francis gave of their marriage. You know, they're fighting that tooth and nail. They're trying to discredit everything that Dr. Francis said about their marriage. They're like on high defense. So in the Scott's confessional, Letitia and Marceau, Letitia says that Lewis is not willing to take what Dr. Francis said into consideration. Yeah, like your husband. Your husband ain't got time for Dr. Francis either. Let's not forget last season when Dr. Francis wanted to meet with all the men, Lewis, Marceau, Martel, and Maurice. And Marceau was ducking and dodging Dr. Francis. He refused to meet with him. It got so bad that Letitia had to trick him into coming to a counseling session. She lied about where they were going just so that he can attend this counseling session with her and Dr. Francis. So at least Lewis showed up at that one session where Dr. Francis had met with the men. Lewis showed up for that. At least he did that. Your man, this is the first time he's ever laid eyes on Dr. Francis. But then you're going to talk about somebody else not taking into consideration what Dr. Francis is saying when your husband's been playing, hide and seek with Dr. Francis. So Marceau himself says in the confessional, he says that he's not into marriage counseling, but he's willing to take some of what Dr. Francis says, the bits and pieces that he thinks applies to him. Well, that's not how that works. You're being just as bad as Lewis. You can't take the bits and pieces of what Dr. Francis says to apply to what you think you need help on. You got to take it all. Just like you're expecting Lewis to swallow it whole, you got to swallow it whole too. You can't take bits and pieces. Then you're wasting your time. You got to listen to what the man says, this man with all of his education, all of his experience, who's analyzed the entire situation. You got to take it all, not just the bits and pieces that you think applies to you. That's ridiculous. So in the kitchen, Lewis apologizes to the Scotts for criticizing their marriage. Now that he's getting it from Dr. Francis, he knows what it feels like. So he's apologizing to them about what he said about, being overly critical or judgmental about their marriages. All of the Scotts have on Dr. Francis's shirt for the retreat, except for the Whitlows, because, they're trying to send out a huge signal that they're not here for Dr. Francis. They don't buy into anything that he's saying, and they just don't believe in any of this. So all of the Scotts are enjoying what the Whitlows are experiencing, especially Marceau. They're absolutely eating it up that Dr. Francis is calling out the Whitlows on their marriage. So the Scotts, they're all having breakfast. The Whitlows and the Scotts are all sitting around at the table for breakfast. And then Kimmy goes into this long thing about, how the Whitlows are not willing to accept advice, but they always want to give advice. Kimmy said a lot. She talks a lot. And at some point, I kind of I fade away whenever she's going on and on and on. But I think what she was trying to say, just to kind of sum it all up, is, you can dish it, but you can't take it. And then she says specifically that when she had her conversation with Tiffany, when they had a one-on-one conversation about Tiffany wanting another baby, Tiffany made it seem like to Kimmy that Lewis was not interested at all in having another child. Lewis had told her that, you are too busy to have another baby. You got too much going on to have another baby. But at the retreat, it seemed like, when the topic came up about them having a baby, it seemed like Lewis was open to the idea of having another child. And so I think Kimmy was trying to call out Tiffany and, you're making things seem like it's one way when it's really another. And I guess that goes into the whole thing of them not being transparent, not being open and honest about their marriage and about what's really going on. I think that's what Kimmy was trying to say. Now, the marriage between Tiffany and Lewis, to me, is a very strange situation. I really don't understand it. I really don't get it. Because sometimes it comes across like Tiffany really doesn't have time for her husband. But then she's the one that practically forced him to marry her when she did that whole entire surprise wedding on the baseball field. Because evidently that's how they got married. Lewis had no idea that he was going to be getting married that day. She had been planning this whole entire wedding behind his back. back. And so he shows up and, surprise, we're getting married today. So maybe that's where their problem stemmed from. Maybe Lewis really wasn't ready to get married at that time. And Tiffany felt like if she didn't do it this way, they wouldn't get married at all. But then again, she kind of acts like she doesn't really have time for him. For example, when she went to go look for her father, her biological father, she took Melody with her. She was going to take her husband. That was the initial plan. And then she had to break the news to him and says, I'm not going to take him. I'm going to take Melody. And he was like hurt by that. He was visibly hurt by that. So there's aspects of their marriage that I really don't understand. So it's bizarre that they want to give advice to other people and call out other people's marriages when it seems like their own marriage is full of cracks. Later on, they have an exercise called the heart-to-heart exercise, or the heart-to-heart practice. And so Dr. Francis calls up Lewis and Tiffany and has them sit across from each other. And Dr. Francis asks about losses. And he asks Lewis, how do you deal with loss? And so Lewis starts off by giving his usual, very lofty, surface, philosophical answers. He said something like, well, everybody takes a loss hard. And Dr. Francis says, look, I want to know how Lewis Whitlow handles loss. What are the specific things that you do when you experience a loss? Don't give me some philosophical mumbo jumbo that can apply to the general public. What do you do when you experience a loss? And he says something like, when he finally got deep and gave a much more meaningful answer, he says something like he tends to cut everybody else off and just kind of like seclude himself. And when he did that, he began to cry. And that reminded me of what Dr. Francis said, that the reason why you always give these surface level answers is because you know that if you got deeper, you're going to feel pain and you want to avoid feeling pain. So this right here kind of proves that Dr. Francis was correct. Then Letitia talks about the loss of her best friend, and then we move on from there. So then later on, we see Lewis and Tiffany. They're having a conversation in their bedroom, and they're talking about Lewis's dad. And Lewis says that his father, put a lot of emphasis on work because he wanted to provide for his family. So because of that, his father really was not around for Lewis to spend some real quality time with Lewis. And he talks about how his dad was never at any of his games when he was a child. So when Lewis finally confronted his father about that, how that made him feel, the father began to be a little bit more proactive. And so as an adult, when Lewis was in some, I guess, a baseball men's league, his father would come around more. So this kind of hit Tiffany hard because she says, I hope you don't see me like that, that I am, too busy for you. But Tiffany, it does kind of look like that. Moving on from there, Dr. Francis meets with Tisha and Marceau. I really want to take a minute to say that Tisha, to me, in this, so far in these episodes, has been looking really, really good. Her makeup has been so light and natural, letting her natural beauty just shine through. I think her hair, her braids are so adorable. She has been looking really, really, really cute so far. So Marceau starts off the meeting with Dr. Francis by saying that, their traditional marriage was going just fine. They had no problems in their marriage at all until about 3 or 4 years ago, which is about the time that they got on the show. So that's when external forces started taking effect on their marriage. And I guess because, being on the show and putting your stuff out there for the whole world to see, a whole bunch of people started stepping in and, giving their 2 cents on what they thought about their marriage. And, not just the public, but also like Miss Wanda and Melody and Martell, because they show a series of flashback scenes where Marceau's fidelity was questioned, with Martell and Melody and Miss Wanda questioning whether or not Marceau was 100% faithful to Letitia. So Letitia says, God gave me this man to be my husband. And then she goes on about, I don't listen to the outside forces. I trust my husband. I follow my husband. I believe in my husband, all of this stuff. And then when she was talking about God gave this man to me to be my husband, I was like, girl, don't put God into this, because it reminded me of that picture, of Marcel's big, wide, blubbery back in that hotel room. Girl, don't put God into this. God did not send that to you. So when Tisha talks about, how she follows her husband and believes in her husband, I believe in my husband, I believe I'm looking at this college educated, wannabe businesswoman, wannabe career woman say these things. And I'm just trying to it's not making any sense to me. for her to come off like so passive, so submissive. I believe in my husband. I believe in everything he tells me. I believe it. I don't believe anybody else. I just believe Marcel. I think Letitia plays that role because she knows that it makes people upset. People react to that, and that's when people start questioning Marcel a lot, because they're like, "Oh, Tisha, don't be so stupid. Don't be so blind and naive. What about when Marcel did this? And what about?" And I think she does that act just so that the people can react and start calling out Marcel, because she cannot call out Marcel. And that's why she does this whole thing of, I believe in my marriage and I believe in my man, because she knows that people don't like it when she says things like that. And that's when they start pointing out things. So she's using the people to call out her husband when she puts on that role, because she can't do it herself. She doesn't have the guts, the backbone, the courage to do that. And even if she did do it, Marcel shuts her down immediately. Anytime that Tisha has attempted to question Marcel, he flips it around. He starts gaslighting her and letting her believe that there's something wrong with her for even thinking that. So then that's why she uses other people to confront her husband for her. And so Dr. Francis says that you can't fight the truth when the truth stands on its own. I'm not quite sure what that meant. It's a little bit too, it's too up there for me. My dumb brain can't comprehend that. I think I know what he's saying, because it's like, I'm not even going to try to interpret that. Moving on. Let's talk about Melody and Martell. Let's talk about Melody first. Melody meets with Mama Holt. Her and Mama Holt have not spoken in a year because it has some type of disagreement over a text message. So, Melody, I guess about a year ago, has sent a text message to Mama Holt telling her mother-in-law that she wasn't going to talk to her no more, because the mother-in-law is always defending Martell's lies and his BS, and she's just not going to handle that. She's not going to take it anymore. On top of that, Mama Holt, and I think what she was referring to, maybe Melody thought that it was Martell that was telling his mom that when him and Melody were married, Martell was going to his mother, I guess, complaining to his mom that Melody was lazy. And, Melody was upset that her mother-in-law believed that, because, she threw that back. The mother-in-law threw that back out there, saying that, oh, when you were at some point, I'm not sure exactly when, but at some point, Mama Holt had said that, when Melody and Martell were married, my son was doing everything for her, and she was just being a lazy wife. So that's when that, Melody sent out that text to her saying, okay, I'm done with you. I'm blocking you. Don't talk to me no more. So they wanted to discuss that at this breakfast. And so Melody was trying to convince her mother-in-law that, look, when I was married to your son, I was anything but lazy. You know how I am. I'm a go-getter. I'm motivated. I'm constantly involved in things. I was not that lazy wife. And Mama Holt was like, I know my son spoiled you. He did, he was such a hardworking man, and he was so, and Melody was like, I was not spoiled. If I wasn't out there hustling and grinding for my coins, I was in the home cooking and cleaning and, doing laundry and ironing. And I was doing I was not like that. And so she said, I don't know why Martell was telling you that, but I was not that kind of a wife. And Mama Holt said, Martell didn't tell me that. That's what I said. That's what I gathered from what I saw with my own eyeballs, that you're a lazy wife. And so they're going back and forth on that whole issue, because Melody's trying to prove her point that I wasn't lazy. And Mama Holt was just like, well, I know what I saw. So she wasn't backing down. Mama Holt was not going to back down on what she said about Melody being lazy. So it came to the point where they were just like at an impasse. And so Melody was just like, well, let's just move forward. I'm going to go ahead and unblock you. And I want it to be like it was before, where I can call you up, go out to eat with the kids, whatever. And Mama Holt was like, you ain't got to unblock me. Go ahead and keep me blocked. But I still love you. Anyways, whatever. So, they're going to move forward. They are starting over, starting fresh and clean. And so that's wonderful. Martell is at home. Did he pass that builder's exam? Somebody tell me, did he pass that builder's exam, or is, the jury's still out on that. So Martell is at home looking at his wine stuff. I guess they sent him some samples of something, and his mother comes downstairs to talk to him, and the mother tells him that I met with Melody. And so, Martell automatically thinks that it was something negative, and the mother said, no, it wasn't negative. It was really quite positive. We talked about some things, talked about the text, whatever issues that we had, but we were able to clear the air and we're moving forward. And so I think Martell was happy about that. He says, it was really nice that, whatever, that y'all were able to move on. Back to the retreat. Now Dr. Francis is meeting up with Kimmy and Maurice. Okay, Maurice's whole thing, which is like so aggravating to hear him talk about this, is so annoying, is, he's not getting enough intimacy from Kimmy. Kimmy says that, when the intimacy is over, I still got to get up and I got to cook and clean and do this and do that. So I'm busy. He gets to lay around and watch football. Once we're done, he's doing whatever the hell he wants to do while I still have responsibilities. So I don't know if this situation, this whole topic about Maurice not getting enough from Kimmy, I don't know if this is a made up problem, like a fake problem, just so that they can have something to show that, hey, we are a real married couple. We have issues too. This is our issue. To cover up the real issue of Maurice's infidelity. So Kimmy's going to make it look like, or Kimmy and Maurice are going to make it look like that their biggest problem is he ain't getting enough. When in reality, there's a whole lot more going on in this marriage. Because this is stupid. Because she says she gives it to him. She says that she shows up. But if he wanted it once every single day, she gives it to him every one single day. But then he wants it twice a day. So she gives it to him twice a day, and then he wants it 3 times a day. So it's like there's no satisfying him. And to me, I don't even want to talk about this because I think it's completely irrelevant. It's a non-issue, and I think it's fake. I think it's one thing if your wife isn't giving it to you at all. If it was like nothing there, that I might believe is an actual problem. But the fact that you're getting it the way you want it, but you still want more, I don't got time. I don't have time. And I think Dr. Francis even knows that this is a bunch of crock. That is my review. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. On your way out, please do not forget to rate the video. If you like this content, please subscribe, and I will definitely talk to you later. Bye.